Hello there, my sleep fellows. Welcome back to the quiet corridors of Hogwarts, where time drifts gently like falling candlelight, and in every stone whispers stories long forgotten. Tonight, we take a soft, slow journey into the heart of one of Hogwarts' oldest mysteries, a tale older than even the ghosts who glide silently through the halls. You may have heard of the founders, brave Godric Gryffindor, wise Rowena Ravenclaw, kind Helga Hufflepuff, and cunning Salazar Slytherin. You know their houses, their legacy, and perhaps even their quarrels. But what if I told you there are spells they created, spells too powerful, too strange, and too dangerous to be taught, even at Hogwarts? This story is about those spells, not the ones in the dusty library books or the ones spoken of during defense against the dark arts. These were whispered into stone walls, etched into enchanted mirrors, and sealed behind doors that no longer have handles. Our tale begins not in a dark chamber, but somewhere much more familiar and comforting. The Gryffindor Common Room. It is evening, and a soft golden glow floats through the room. The fireplace crackles gently, its warm flickers dancing across the red and gold tapestries. The scent of cinnamon and old parchment lingers faintly in the air. Outside the tall windows, snow drifts down quietly, frosting the castle rooftops in a soft white hush. In a cozy corner near the fire, Hermione Granger has curled herself into a deep armchair, her legs tucked under her, a thick velvet blanket around her shoulders. Beside her, a pile of books sits taller than the armrest, titles like Legends of Ancient Charms and Founders Folklore, Spells and Shadows. Harry Potter is lounging near the hearth, absently turning his wand in his hand, while Ron stretches out on the rug, a biscuit hanging from his fingers as Crookshanks eyes it with great interest. There's no rush, no urgency, just the gentle warmth of friendship and the promise of a quiet night. The ticking of the ancient grandfather clock in the corner keeps slow, steady time. Occasionally, a portrait on the wall murmurs something in its sleep, or the fire pops softly, sending a small shower of sparks into the air. This is where our journey begins, not with a bang, not with a battle, but with a mystery. A soft question that has been resting under the surface of Hogwarts for centuries, a secret waiting to be rediscovered. So, dear listener, if you find your eyes gently closing as we speak, that's perfectly fine. You're safe here in these old castle walls. Let the quiet magic of the moment guide you into stillness, and if you enjoy these sleepy wanderings through the wizarding world, feel free to subscribe, like, or return for another tale when the stars next call. Now, take a deep breath, sink into the softness around you, and let us gently turn the first page of this forgotten chapter, where the spells of the founders sleep, hidden, hushed, and waiting. The fire in the Gryffindor Common Room continued to cast long, sleepy shadows along the stone walls as the evening settled more deeply around the castle. The familiar hush of Hogwarts at night was wrapping itself gently around its students like an enchanted quilt, and nestled among the flickering lights were three of our most familiar companions, Harry, Hermione, and Ron. Hermione, as always, was the first to notice something strange. She had found an obscure reference in one of her books, Magics Long Forgotten and Why They Were Buried. It had been buried in the restricted section, locked behind a charm that she, of course, had managed to respectfully undo with a note from Professor McGonagall and a great deal of persuasion. She was 17 now, wiser than ever, and had developed a deep interest in magical ethics, particularly in spells that had been intentionally erased from the curriculum. There was something about the idea of magic too dangerous to use and too ancient to ignore. She peered over her book with a soft whisper. "Harry, listen to this," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Her voice was calm, but there was a quiet current of wonder running through it. Harry looked up, his green eyes reflecting the firelight. Though the war was over and peace had returned, a part of him remained watchful, curious. These days, he sought understanding, not battle, and Hermione's tone always meant something worth listening to. Ron groaned softly from the rug, but turned his head. "If it's another cursed broomstick story, I'm out." Hermione gave a little huff, but her smile betrayed her amusement. "It's not a story, Ron. It's a list, a very short list. Spells created by the founders themselves, each one hidden after being deemed too powerful, not dark necessarily, just something else." Harry leaned in now, intrigued. "Like what kind of spells?" "That's the thing," Hermione said. "No one knows, or rather, someone once did, but the knowledge was sealed. The spells were locked behind what the book calls the Founder's Veil, a magical veil woven into the castle itself, and it says only a student of all four houses can find the key." Ron raised an eyebrow. "How's that supposed to work? Nobody gets sorted into all four houses." Hermione closed the book softly. "Exactly. Which means maybe the key isn't a person. Maybe it's a place or a moment." And just like that, the fire crackled a little louder, as if agreeing. The air in the common room shifted, almost imperceptibly, and the portraits on the walls seemed to listen in. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, curiosity warmed the hearts of three friends once again. They weren't chasing danger this time. They were seeking understanding, and the quiet pull of ancient magic was already beginning to stir. This is where their journey truly begins, gently, with old friendships, steady hearts, and the soft rustling of pages yet to be turned. The candles in the great hall had long since flickered out, leaving only a soft glow from the enchanted ceiling above. Wisps of misty moonlight shimmered over the cold stone floors, casting silver pools in the empty corridors. The castle had exhaled into its night, settling into quiet slumber, except for one narrow passage behind the library that still echoed with hushed whispers and the occasional clink of a turning doorknob. Hermione Granger held her breath as she guided Harry and Ron through the passage, her wand tip glowing just enough to illuminate the old bricks and dusty cobwebs. "Are you sure this is the right passage?" Ron whispered, shifting nervously. Hermione nodded. "I found it in Hogwarts. A history. Well, not directly, but it hinted at a sealed door that hadn't been opened in centuries. I think this is it." The trio halted before a small, arched stone doorway, almost lost in the shadows. The doorway had no handle, no keyhole, just worn carvings around the frame, barely legible, almost hidden. Hermione leaned closer, brushing off dust with a gentle hand. "The Founders," she murmured. Harry stepped forward, his voice low. "You think this leads to something they left behind?" Hermione didn't answer right away. Her eyes traced the worn runes, symbols older than any in their textbooks. Rowena Ravenclaw used to hide her private research here. The book mentioned a chamber of echoes where spells too dangerous for even Hogwarts walls were hidden away. Ron groaned. Do we really want to open a place that Hogwarts itself forgot? Hermione gave him a small smile. We're not opening anything yet, just peeking. She drew her wand and traced a silent arc over the frame. Nothing happened at first. Then a low, resonant hum filled the air. The stone began to shift, pieces rearranging as if recalling an ancient pattern. Then, quietly, the wall melted into an opening, revealing a staircase spiraling downward into a faint, violet light. The air that flowed from the opening was cool, heavy with enchantments. Not dark magic exactly, but something ancient, wild, forgotten, with hearts thudding gently, not from fear but from awe. The trio stepped down into the spiral, their footsteps soft against the stone. The passage widened into a rounded chamber whose walls were covered in etched sigils and hovering orbs of light. At the center was a pedestal, and on it lay a single parchment, untouched by time. Hermione approached first. Her fingers hovered, then settled beside the scroll, reverent. "It's not sealed," she breathed. "It's not cursed, at least, I don't think." She unrolled it carefully. The script was beautiful, written in a hand that flowed like river water. "It's a spell," she whispered, "but not in any language I recognize fully. There's Latin, yes, but combined with something else. Elvish, ancient druidic." Harry moved beside her. "What does it do?" Hermione's eyes flicked over the page. "It's called Lumen Cordis, the light of the heart, but there's a warning. Here," she pointed. "Only those with balanced intent may invoke its light. Others will lose what they most fear to lose." Ron frowned. "That's vague." Hermione nodded slowly. "Which means it's serious." She touched her wand to the text and murmured, "Revelare." The spell shimmered, then cast a soft glow across the room. Suddenly, echoes began to drift across the walls, whispers, like recorded voices etched into stone. The voice that spoke first was unmistakable, calm, wise, and weighted with old magic. "Rowena," it said, "they will come. Someday, when the world is brave enough to listen again." Another voice followed, deeper, slower. "Salazar wanted them locked away, but we agreed, let the future choose." Harry's breath caught. These were the voices of the Founders. Helga's gentle voice joined. "If their hearts are strong, they will not seek to wield power, but to understand it." And then the fourth voice, Godric Gryffindor, steady and sure. "We trust them." The voices faded, silence bloomed, then a soft hum, as if the spell had recognized their presence. On the far wall, a single glowing rune, began to pulse, softly, steadily. Hermione stepped toward it, her wand raised. As she reached it, the rune shimmered and opened like a keyhole of light, revealing a second scroll inside the wall. Hermione plucked it gently. This one was different, less a spell, more a record, a story, etched by Rowena herself. It told of 4 spells, crafted not to be used, but to test the boundaries of magical ethics. Spells that interacted with the core of one's soul. None had cast them in full, not even the founders. They agreed they were too potent, too personal, and now they were here. Harry looked at Hermione, his voice a hush. "What do we do with it?" She smiled softly. "We learn, quietly, gently, and if they ever must be used, we decide, together." Ron glanced nervously around. "And if someone else finds this place first?" Hermione's smile grew. "Then we make sure it's never misused." She pointed her wand at the chamber's entrance and whispered a complex locking spell. The doorway shimmered, faded, and sealed itself once again. The trio stepped back into the moonlit corridor, the scrolls tucked safely under Hermione's arm. As the wall returned to solid stone behind them, they paused. The quiet of the castle returned, gentle and familiar. But something had shifted. They had heard the voices of legends, and now the future of those ancient spells rested in their hands. There are rooms in Hogwarts that even the most seasoned professors tread lightly around. One such chamber, veiled beneath enchantments and protected by riddles known only to the headmasters of old, now found its secrecy gently unraveling, though not by force, but by curiosity. It was the evening after the hidden door had yielded to Hermione's carefully reasoned logic and Harry's instinctual sense of rightness. As the trio returned from dinner in the great hall, where pumpkin pasties and floating candles had created a warm bubble of familiarity, the castle seemed unusually hushed. A snow-dusted breeze curled through the high windows, and the portraits along the corridors whispered quietly to each other, their painted voices carried softly in the candlelight. "Do you feel that?" Hermione murmured, placing a gloved hand on the stone wall just beside a mounted tapestry of Sir Cadogan in his usual chaotic glory. Harry paused. The wall had a hum beneath it, not loud, but rhythmic, like breathing. Ron tilted his head. "It's like the castle's waiting." Drawn by something they couldn't quite name, they followed the familiar corridor that once ended in a blank wall, but now revealed a slender arched doorway of ancient black stone, crowned by an inscription in a language older than Latin. It shimmered faintly, as if dusted in frost. With cautious reverence, they stepped through. Inside, the air felt older, still, as though no footstep had disturbed it for centuries. The room was circular and vast, lined with enormous stone slabs set upright like tablets. Each glowed faintly with runes, the language of ancient spellwork, the kind of magic not taught anymore, not since the founders themselves had breathed it into being. Hermione's eyes widened in recognition. "These are prototypes, early spells. Look at that one. There's a variation of the disillusionment charm, but it's fused with an intent marker, almost like it would react differently depending on what the caster is feeling." Ron scratched his head. sounds dangerous. Or powerful, Harry said quietly, stepping toward one of the slabs. It was darker than the others, its runes charred at the edges. A faint buzzing filled the air around it, like the echo of something long sealed. Hermione traced a hand over it. It's a suppression charm, not to quiet a sound, but to suppress thought, emotion, this kind of magic. It was meant to control not just behavior, but belief. Harry stepped back, breath catching. No wonder it was hidden. This isn't just magic, it's influence. And as if those very words stirred the air, the chamber shifted. A section of the wall melted away like mist, revealing a smaller alcove they hadn't noticed before. Inside was a pedestal, and upon it, a single object, a narrow glass vial filled with a silver, swirling substance. Hermione's voice dropped to a whisper. That's memory. The moment they stepped into the alcove, the temperature dropped, not in a frightening way, but in a stillness that demanded respect. Harry reached out and gently picked up the vial. The moment his skin touched the cool glass, the room shimmered. They were no longer standing in a chamber of stone, but watching a vision unfold around them, like a pensive memory brought to life. The walls of Hogwarts were new, raw stone lit by torchlight. The four founders stood in a half circle, Rowena Ravenclaw, her hand extended toward the others, Helga Hufflepuff, steady and warm, Salazar Slytherin, expression guarded, and Godric Gryffindor, fierce yet hesitant. Rowena was speaking, her voice musical, though faint. We cannot leave such spells unguarded. They will tempt the wrong minds, even in our own time. Salazar's eyes narrowed. We cannot unmake what has already been woven. The best we can do is seal them, layer them in riddle and oath. Helga stepped forward, placing a hand over the center rune that hovered between them. Then we seal it with loyalty, to the castle, to the students, to the future. Godric was the last to nod. Let Hogwarts choose its heirs wisely. The vision faded gently, the air warming again as they returned to the chamber's quiet embrace. Ron was the first to speak. They feared their own creations. Hermione nodded, and rightly so. These spells weren't just powerful, they challenged free will, blurred the lines between control and guidance. This room isn't just history, it's a warning. Harry looked at the glass vial still in his hand, now silent, the memory stilled. But they didn't destroy it, they left it, here, waiting. Outside, the snow began to fall again. Large, gentle flakes drifted past the windows like glowing feathers. The trio stepped back from the pedestal, hearts steady but thoughtful. Whatever had drawn them here, it wasn't to use the magic, it was to understand it. As they exited the chamber, the black door shimmered closed behind them once more, leaving no trace it had ever been there. Back in the corridor, the portraits were silent, but not asleep. Some eyes followed them thoughtfully, as if pleased. Others turned inward, whispering among themselves. As they passed a buying of the founder's crest, the lion shimmered slightly in its corner, casting a flickering gaze toward the students below. It blinked once and smiled. They did not speak much on the walk back to Gryffindor Tower. Some discoveries needed time to settle, and Hogwarts, wise and ancient, seemed to understand that. By the time they reached the common room, the fire was already lit, as though waiting. The chairs were arranged just so, the warmth welcoming, and Crookshanks snored gently atop a well-worn rug. "Do you think—" Ron began, but didn't finish. Harry simply nodded. "Yeah, we were meant to see it, not use it. Just remember." Hermione smiled softly, her eyes still far away. "Magic isn't just power, it's memory, too, and choice." And as the fire crackled gently beside them, casting flickering gold across the stone walls, the three friends sat in silence, wrapped not in fear, but in understanding. The past had whispered, and they had listened. Far above them, in the tallest tower, a portrait of Rowena Ravenclaw gazed out over the night sky. Her painted eyes shone faintly, filled with starlight, and if one listened closely, very closely, they might hear her whisper, "Well done, children, well done." As the enchanted dusk settled across the spires of Hogwarts, the castle seemed to exhale a long, contented sigh. Shadows lengthened gently across the stone corridors, and the soft flutter of owls echoed through the corridors like lullabies whispered into the rafters. Harry, Hermione, and Ron now found themselves retreating to the comfort of the library's hidden alcove, a nook known only to a handful of curious students over the centuries. A place that seemed to exist slightly outside of time, wrapped in perpetual candlelight and warm, whispering stillness. The scroll they had recovered, the one marked with strange looping script and sealed with a symbol none of them recognized, lay unrolled on the table between them. It hadn't exploded into flames or disappeared in sparks like most protective magical artifacts. Instead, it revealed something more curious. Ink that shimmered like water and refused to sit still. The words didn't just glow, they pulsed softly, as if alive. Hermione tilted her head, her curls brushing the aged parchment. "These aren't just any spells," she murmured, her voice barely above a breath. "These are elemental enchantments, older than Latin. This one seems to bind memory to stone. That one," she paused, frowning. "That one seems to summon something from the void." Ron squinted. "That doesn't sound very sleep-friendly." "Nothing in here is, really," Harry added, though not unkindly. He traced a line on the parchment with his fingertip, careful not to touch it. "It's like the founders wrote this for themselves only, as if they didn't want anyone else to ever find it." The room around them was silent, except for the occasional creak of the ancient floorboards. A breeze slipped through the small circular window, stirring the edge of the scroll. A few candles flickered, though none went out. Everything remained calm, yet there was a feeling like a curtain was being drawn back, slowly, gently, to reveal something long slumbering. Hermione's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "The Founder's Tower," she whispered. "It's not in the current floor plan of Hogwarts, but early texts mention it, before even the Chamber of Secrets. A part of the castle that was sealed by magic so old it predates most enchantments. That has to be where these spells came from." "But no one's ever found it," Harry said. "Even the Marauder's map doesn't show it." "Because it exists in a different magical plane," she said, almost dreamily. "Not hidden, just out of sync." Ron leaned back, crossing his arms. Right. So we're supposed to find a tower that's invisible, untraceable, and maybe floating in magical fog? Hermione gave a small smile. Exactly. The trio agreed to explore the old classrooms near the astronomy wing the next evening. That part of the castle had long been abandoned, its towers now serving as perches for the older owls or storage for unused artifacts. As they walked the winding staircases, their footfalls echoed in soft rhythm. The walls here felt older, the magic heavier. Dust floated like fairy powder in the golden light of their wands. They reached a hallway so narrow it might have been mistaken for a mistake in construction. But on its far end, a peculiar door waited, twisted wood in the shape of ivy, its handle carved like a serpent eating its own tail. Ron blinked. Well, that's comforting. Hermione raised her wand, speaking not a spell, but a phrase. In terra antiquissima. There was no flash, no burst. The door simply breathed open, exhaling a scent of lavender, aged stone, and starlight. Inside was not a room, but a spiral staircase curling up into the dark. They climbed it in silence, the only sounds being their own breathing and the faint crackle of old magic humming through the air like a gentle tune. The top of the staircase led to a small circular landing where 4 empty plinths stood, one for each founder. Around them, the air shimmered faintly, as if resisting their presence. Hermione, careful as ever, approached the plinth marked with Ravenclaw's symbol. She pulled from her satchel a fragment of blue-stained glass she'd found in the library weeks earlier, a trinket she believed had once adorned Rowena's diadem. When she placed it upon the plinth, the room trembled faintly, not a quake, but a sigh, and the light around them deepened into a soft blue hue. Harry stepped forward next, holding the small phoenix feather that Dumbledore had once gifted him, not for use in a wand, but as a symbol of hope. Placing it on Godric's plinth, a golden warmth spread across the room like sunrise, and soft embers hung in the air for just a moment. Ron looked sheepishly between them. I didn't bring anything, he said, rubbing his neck. But then Hermione pointed. You're a Weasley. Your blood is tied to magic older than Merlin in some ways. Just stand there. He obeyed, and to everyone's quiet astonishment, the plinth marked with Hufflepuff's crest glowed with a warm, earthy light. No fanfare, no flash, just a soft glow that smelled faintly of fresh grass and honey bread. The 4th plinth, bearing the mark of Salazar Slytherin, remained quiet. Hermione hesitated. We don't have anything connected to him. Good, said Ron, but Harry frowned. We need the full circle. He stepped forward and placed a silver scale taken long ago from the remains of the basilisk in the chamber. It shimmered cold and silver blue as it touched the stone. The moment it settled, a low hum filled the room, not menacing, not ominous, just old, powerful, waiting. The walls began to shift, not collapse, not crumble, but move. Bookshelves appeared where there were none. Staircases unfolded downward, and paintings blinked into place on the walls. This was the Founder's Tower, forgotten by time, hidden by purpose. A nearby portrait came to life, an ancient witch with steel-colored hair and sharp, brilliant eyes regarded them. "It's been centuries," she said, her voice like silk over stone, "since students stood here not out of ambition, but need." The trio stood silent, unsure whether to bow or speak. She smiled. "You seek the spells, the ones we buried so no tyrant could ever wield them again." Hermione spoke carefully. "We want to understand, not use." The portrait of Rowena Ravenclaw nodded slowly. "Then you must listen, not learn, watch, not take, and remember, not repeat." And just like that, the walls began to whisper, no words, no clear instructions, just layers of memory unfolding like petals, soft and filled with forgotten things. The very tower began to breathe again. The trio didn't move. They stood quietly, letting the stories come to them. Tales of spells that could erase grief, alter fate, or twist time into gentle loops. Not curses, but not blessings either. Just raw, untouched magic from an era where morality had not yet been invented. As the candlelight deepened and night grew heavy around the castle, the tower held them in silence. What had begun as an evening of curiosity was now a step into the pages of Hogwarts' soul, and the next choice would be entirely their own. The air in the Founder's Tower remained hushed, as though every stone held its breath. The spiral staircases now curved around bookshelves of impossible height, some shelves fading into mist as they reached the ceiling. Strange glowing threads hung between sections, perhaps protective enchantments or remnants of a forgotten cataloging system. Here, no dust gathered. Time did not rush. The magic was ancient and still, yet awake. Harry, Hermione, and Ron stood in quiet awe, each taking a different path through the tower's lower chamber, as if the space itself guided them individually. They didn't speak aloud. Words somehow felt too loud, too modern, in this place shaped by the Founder's own hands. Hermione, naturally drawn to the library's heart, reached a domed alcove filled with floating scrolls. Each scroll shimmered with magic, and none bore titles. Her fingers hovered near one, unsure whether it would vanish at her touch. But it didn't. Instead, as her hand neared the parchment, it gently unrolled in midair. What she saw wasn't a spell, but a story. To bend sorrow into silence is not kindness, but cowardice, it began, written in ancient script that translated itself as she watched. It told the tale of Helga Hufflepuff, who once tried to craft a charm that could erase the memory of loss. The spell worked, but too well. It took not only pain, but love, not only grief, but history. In the end, she sealed the spell away and wept at what she had almost unmade. Hermione exhaled deeply. She touched the scroll's edge in reverence. "Some magic," she whispered, "is powerful because we choose not to use it." Meanwhile, Ron wandered through what appeared to be a garden, but one that grew beneath glass, tucked inside the tower's middle tier. There, herbs shimmered with dew despite the absence of water. A stone bench bore carvings in Parseltongue, which he couldn't read, but something about the space felt oddly familiar. In the center was a tree, small, silvery, with leaves that made no sound. He leaned closer and saw a carving beneath its roots. For those who carry burdens they never chose. Ron sat on the bench and ran a hand through his hair. Huh, he murmured, that's me some days. And somehow, the leaves of the tree shimmered in gentle agreement. Up above, Harry had found a corridor lined with portraits, but these were unlike the ones scattered throughout Hogwarts. These figures didn't speak unless spoken to, and their eyes followed with quiet attentiveness. Each bore a small inscription of a moment when they chose not to act. A Slytherin wizard who had destroyed a powerful spell because he feared what it would make of him. A Gryffindor who walked away from a duel even when honor demanded it. A Ravenclaw who erased her own discovery because it threatened the balance of the magical world. Harry paused in front of one that looked strikingly like Godric Gryffindor himself, though much younger than the statue he'd seen before. The plaque below read simply, I could have made a spell to win any war. Instead, I forged a charm to end them. Harry stared for a long time. He wondered how many such decisions shaped the world, not through force, but through restraint. Eventually, the trio gathered again in the central chamber. A gentle bell sound, not from metal, but from magic itself, signaled the hour's change, though they had no idea how long they'd spent inside. Time in the Founder's Tower did not follow ordinary rules. Hermione looked up. I think this place isn't just to store spells. It's to remind us. Of what? Ron asked. That knowledge isn't the same as wisdom, she replied softly. Harry nodded, and that magic, real magic, asks us to choose who we want to be. From the far corner of the room, a faint glow pulsed. A small pedestal now stood where there had been none before. On it, a book had appeared, bound in weathered dragon hide, its pages edged with silver. No title, no markings, just presence. They approached slowly, side by side. What do we do with it? Ron asked. Hermione studied it carefully. I think it's waiting for a decision. It doesn't want to be owned. It wants to be understood. Harry looked around at the tower, the portraits, the whispers, the spells that asked to be left alone. He reached out, not to take the book, but to close its cover gently. We don't take it, he said. We learn from it. Then we leave it here for those who are ready. The moment his hand left the book, the light around it dimmed. The pedestal sank slowly into the floor, not in sadness, but in satisfaction. The tower responded with a soft pulse of light, and the stairs they'd climbed earlier now reappeared, winding downward with warmth and welcome. As they descended, none of them looked back right away. They didn't need to, because what they carried now wasn't a spell or a secret. It was understanding. As the trio descended the glowing spiral staircase, something shifted in the tower's air, a gentle hush that felt like the pause between pages of a well-worn book. Not fear, but reverence. The kind of silence that lives inside places too sacred for noise. Their footsteps didn't echo. Instead, they seemed to be absorbed by the ancient stones, as if the very walls remembered. When they reached the bottom, the chamber had transformed again. Where once had been a quiet entry hall, now stood a wide circular room bathed in the golden hue of candlelight. The light didn't flicker or burn. It glowed with a living warmth, as if drawn from sunrise and old memories. In the center of the chamber floated a single tapestry, suspended in the air by nothing at all. The tapestry bore the image of 4 wizards, arm in arm: Godric, Helga, Rowena, and Salazar. But as the trio stepped closer, the image began to change. The arms lowered, the faces aged, and slowly scenes wove themselves across the fabric, spells cast in fire and ice, enchanted beasts rising and falling, arguments in high towers, choices made in quiet halls. There were no words, only the stories told through shimmering thread and shifting color. Hermione gasped softly. "It's their memory, the Founders, all of it." They watched, spellbound, as one particular image lingered, a spellbook, ancient and pulsating with dark red light, held between Rowena and Salazar. Salazar's hand reached for it eagerly. Rowena's withdrew. The tension between them stitched itself into the fabric like a storm. Then came a solemn vote. Godric raised his wand and spoke a vow. Helga followed. Rowena wept as she nodded. Only Salazar turned away, the spellbook still in his hands. The tapestry stilled, and from the corner of the room, a gentle voice echoed, not loud, not even fully formed, more like an echo of thought. "There are spells," it murmured, "that shape the world not through might, but through memory, and it is memory that carries both burden and blessing." A figure stepped forward, not alive, but shimmering like a dream made of candle smoke, an echo, a memory. It was Helga Hufflepuff, not the stern figure depicted in history books, but a soft, kind face with eyes that had seen too much and still chosen gentleness. Her voice was more like wind brushing over leaves. "You have come with questions," she said, "but it is your heart that brought you here, not your wand." Harry took a small step forward. Why were the spells forbidden? Helga's gaze moved to the tapestry, where the scene now shifted once again, this time to a quiet room lit by only one candle, Salazar kneeling over a page of parchment, drawing runes that glowed with terrible promise. "Because they were made to control," she whispered, "not to protect, not to heal, but to command, to erase, to bend others to will." Hermione's brow furrowed. "But surely magic is about intent, isn't it? What we use it for." Helga nodded slowly. "That is the beautiful lie we tell ourselves. But some magic changes the caster, no matter their intent, just as some doors, once opened, never truly close again." Ron looked to Harry, then back at the ghostly founder. "So, they weren't evil?" "No," Helga said gently. "They were curious, brilliant, bold, but magic at its strongest always asks a price. Some of us were willing to pay it, others were not." The room dimmed slightly, and Helga turned to Harry. "You carry a scar not from a spell, but from a choice someone else made. You understand, don't you? That power, without restraint, leaves marks." Harry nodded quietly. The echo of Helga stepped back, and another shimmer took her place. This time, it was Godric Gryffindor. His presence was strong, but calm, like a lion resting beneath golden sun. He looked at Ron first, offering a soft smile. I once believed courage meant taking action, but in time, I learned true bravery is also knowing when not to. The tapestry behind him shifted to a scene of Godric walking away from a battle, not defeated, but whole. We sealed the cells not because we feared them, he said, but because we understood what they might make of those who sought them out. Then he looked to Hermione. You ask the right questions, Miss Granger, and someday you may be the one to answer them for others. But know this, knowledge is not a path to power. It is a mirror, and it shows you who you truly are. With those final words, the Founder's echoes faded like mist in sunlight, leaving only the tapestry gently floating in place. No dramatic music, no storm of revelation, just silence and understanding. The three friends stood still for a long moment. Finally, Hermione whispered, "They left it here, not to hide the spells, but to remind us why they chose not to use them." Harry placed a hand on the tapestry. It felt warm, like someone had been standing there only moments ago. He didn't need to take anything from it. The lesson had already passed into him. Ron cleared his throat quietly. So, what now? Harry smiled faintly. We go home. We carry the story, and maybe one day when someone asks what real magic is, we'll know what to say. They turned to each other and walked slowly back toward the staircase. The tapestry dimmed behind them, returning to its original image. 4 friends, side by side, still bound by memory. The chamber didn't close. It didn't vanish. It simply waited because it knew. Someday, someone else would come looking for answers, and the Founders, as always, would be ready to share. The air in the chamber felt softer now, as though the room itself had exhaled. The tapestry floated once more in quiet stillness, its threads no longer shifting, but settled in a calm silence, like a story that had finally been told. Harry, Hermione, and Ron lingered a moment longer, their eyes adjusting to the warm glow as the last of the Founders' echoes faded into gentle memory. They didn't need to speak. The quiet between them was full of understanding. No treasures had been taken, no forbidden spells copied or hidden away. What they carried now was something far more powerful, clarity, and the peace that comes with knowing a truth was respected rather than exploited. They turned to leave, their footsteps light as they climbed back up the spiral staircase. The walls no longer whispered, but instead it seemed to guide them with comforting warmth, like a hallway that recognized returning friends. As they reached the top, the castle welcomed them back. The air smelled of stone, warmed by torches, and the faint, sweet scent of honeyed tea. Hogwarts' way of saying, "You're safe, you're home." The night had deepened, the corridors quiet as most students slept soundly in their dormitories. Outside, snow was gently falling against the tall stained glass windows, tiny flakes catching in moonlight like floating stars. It was the sort of night that made time feel slow, deliberate, and somehow deeply comforting. As they made their way toward Gryffindor Tower, Ron gave a long, contented sigh. That was a lot, he murmured, rubbing the back of his neck. Hermione smiled softly. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Why Dumbledore never sought those spells. Why even the greatest wizards sometimes choose silence over answers. Harry glanced out the nearest window, watching the flakes drift lazily through the sky. I think they wanted us to learn the way they did, not through power, but through understanding. They stopped just outside the portrait of the fat lady, who, unusually, was dozing in her frame, a knitting project balanced on her lap. The common room was quiet behind her, embers glowing in the hearth, soft golden light flickering across cozy armchairs and half-read books left on side tables. Hermione gently gave the password, and the portrait swung open with a yawn and a sleepy nod. Inside, the room was warm and still. The fire gave off a low hum, and the room seemed to welcome them back without question. The three sat down near the hearth, not out of exhaustion, but to take a final moment to be still. Harry leaned back in one of the armchairs, his eyes half closed. "You know," he said softly, "I think the most powerful magic we saw tonight wasn't in the spells." Hermione looked over at him, her voice a quiet murmur. "It was in the choice not to use them." Ron gave a small nod, his gaze on the fire, and in the fact that they trusted someone would understand that someday. They sat like that for a while, the warmth of the fire wrapping around them like a well-worn blanket. No rush, no questions left unanswered, just the soft ticking of the castle's heart and the feeling of being held gently by its age-old magic. Somewhere above them, the great clock in the astronomy tower chimed softly, just once, a gentle note that marked neither urgency nor ending, but simply the quiet rhythm of night. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, the castle dreamed, and in that moment, so did they. And so, the castle settled once more into its nighttime hush, its old stone walls holding secrets, stories, and now the quiet trust of three young hearts who had walked with the past and returned unchanged, but somehow wiser. Up in the dormitory, Harry tucked the covers a little closer around himself. The beds in Gryffindor Tower had always been warm, but tonight they seemed softer, as if the magic of the founders had left behind a final, quiet gift. Not a spell or a relic, but a whisper of comfort, a reminder that wisdom need not always be loud or showy. Sometimes it lived in stillness. The gentle crackle of the common room fire faded into memory as the world outside drifted into silence. Snowflakes continued to fall beyond the windows, blanketing the castle grounds in quitted white, as if tucking the entire school under a quilt of dreams. In another room, perhaps Hermione was still reading by candlelight, the soft scratch of her quill slowing with each passing moment. Ron, likely already asleep, was probably dreaming of chess pieces marching politely across a snowy board. And somewhere in the castle, the enchanted paintings, those silent watchers, nodded approvingly, content that the choices made tonight had honored the wisdom of those who came before. If you close your eyes now, you might still feel the echoes of that hidden chamber beneath the stones, the warm pull of Hogwarts magic wrapping around you like a protective charm. There is nothing more to solve, no mysteries to chase tonight, only quiet. You are safe, you are held, and the castle, timeless, thoughtful, and alive in its own way, will still be here in the morning. So rest easy, dear listener. Let your thoughts drift gently, like snow settling on the forbidden forest. Let your breath slow with the rhythm of ancient spells whispered long ago. And as sleep finds you, know this: in the heart of Hogwarts, peace is not something to search for. It is always waiting, just behind the walls, within the magic, and now within you. Good night, and may your dreams be wrapped in wonder.